Honestly, hindsight is 2020, but where Barca started the day isn't where Barca ended the day. Yes, Barca were struggling this season, and Atletico Madrid have been the best team in the Liga, but the path to Barcelona winning was there. History on their side, Diego Simeone had never beaten Barca in the Liga, and Atletico Madrid haven't gotten a result against them for more than a decade. But that doesn't matter as much as Atletico not having Luis Suarez and a bunch of other players, plus a not fully fit Diego Costa, so that meant no natural number 9 for Simeone. And while Barca doesn't have a number 9 either, we should have expected some goals coming from Messi. He averaged 0.78 goals against the Colchoneros heading into today, and so often when Messi likes scoring against an opponent, he does so. Again, history lets Ronald Koeman down. Usually I run through the big moments in these matches, and I guess I will get to some of them, but I'm going to start where I usually don't begin. And that's just giving you my big picture opinion about what this loss means. What it means for Atletico is a proper chance at the title. They have been the best team in the Liga, now with a plus 16 goal differential, and plummeted Barca into 10th place. Barca still have games in hand on everyone but Atletico, but those games don't matter if you don't turn those games into points. And without points, well, this is where things get ugly. I pushed back on Francesca's doom and gloom about this season because this team on paper is extremely talented. At the start of the season, it looked the deepest squad since Luis Enrique was on the sideline. Messi is the captain and a professional, and obviously trusting that his talent was enough to push this team into the title race. In reality, this team has been worse than expected. Not speaking of individuals, but the whole unit. They create chances, but they don't score enough of them, and they concede far too many of them. Not a recipe for success. And clearly, this season's recipe isn't going to be good enough to chase the title, but it needs to be good enough to make the top 4 and keep a Champions League place. Without the Champions League spot, the financial situation gets even worse. Much worse, actually. And you might say, what does it matter? The club is already on the verge of bankruptcy. Well, the worse things are, the harder it will be to get back from. This rebuild of sorts could take 1 season or 2 seasons, but missing out on the Champions League could make this rebuilding era last longer than any Kool-Aids would want. I guess we should talk about the match though, as much as I don't want to. So let's get the most embarrassing thing out of the way first. I was going to say ugliest or most cringeworthy, but the Atletico goal didn't qualify for that today. I saw people blaming Piqué or Ter Stegen, but much like the fence rider that I am, I put the blame about 70% on Mats and 30% on Piqué. By coming up where he did, right at the stroke of halftime, Piqué was one touch away from disaster, and that was exactly the touch he delivered. Correa sent Carrasco out to the races, and the nutmeg of Ter Stegen was the cherry on top of a Sunday of horrors for the goalkeeper. In just his second game of the season, this was the kind of mental mistake that would get a lesser goalkeeper punished. One mistake like this, he makes about 2 every season, doesn't change my opinion of him. But he is a big reason why Barca failed to take home even a draw. On the other side of the field, the other reason Barca failed to get any points was once again the finishing, which I usually cite, but today it was even more than that. It's not rocket science to see the difference between Real Betis and Atletico. Betis allowed Barca to take open spaces, and that seemed to fill them with confidence. As expected, Atletico are quick to pressure the flanks and force quick crosses into the box. The crosses from either flank weren't good enough on the evening, but that doesn't mean that there weren't chances. Missed opportunities from Griezmann and Lenglet were the flagship misses, and you have to think a more clinical number 9 finishes those chances. I may not have the time now, but I may need to do some digging to see where Griezmann is at his best in front of goal. Not in the build-up, but on putting the ball in the net all time. Because these spots are not his spots. So for all we said about Atletico missing a number 9, it was Barca's lack of a target forward that I really think doomed them tonight. And against so many of the teams that sit back and dance the Blaugrana to beat them, just as Getafe did last month. Before I talk about the injuries, I do want to mention the one positive I took away from this match, and that's Ousmane Dembélé continuing to not only be on the field, but by playing himself back into what I would consider a little bit of form. Again, don't give me that garbage about his football brain. He is still finding his way back onto a field for the first time consistently in 2 years, and I think his performances have continued to be better this season than what we've seen in start and stop appearances for the last 2 seasons. He was especially bright in the early part of the game. That nasty fall with Carrasco made us all hold our breath, but thankfully he stayed in the game, and once he came out for the second half, we knew we were in the clear. But after that moment, he didn't really look himself, which is unfortunate, and I hope that he isn't added to the injury list as well. Because as for the players that were added to that list tonight, this is where it got really ugly. Atletico are physical, they are what they are, but they are still phenomenal players that usually don't resort to dirty plays, and I don't think that's what we saw today either. Raul Garcia, now with Athletic Club, and Diego Costa. Those are players that we expect some petty physicality. But for Correa, it was an inadvertent collision with Alba and Piqué that led to what was a pretty gruesome injury for Piqué. By the time you watch this, we may know the test results. But for now, he could be out for 4 weeks, or he could be out for a year if it's an ACL, which I don't think it is because he did walk out of the stadium without crutches. But if it's close to that bad, even an MCL tear for the plus 30-year-old center back, we don't know what that does in the long run. For Sergio Roberto, things obviously won't be that bad, but any calls for Sergiño Dest to get some starts will soon be answered. The American is going to be thrust right into a starring role now. As for how Piqué is replaced in the short term, that will be revealed against Dynamo Kiev. But if I had to guess, until Busquets comes back, and Araujo for that matter, it'll be De Jong pairing Lenglet, then Pjanic and Coutinho in the middle behind the same front four we saw start today. A 10th place team making do with the injury crisis they have. But an injury crisis is still no excuse for some of the other puzzling takeaways. I don't blame Ronald Koeman for taking the job of a club in crisis. And even his substitutes. Look at that bench. I know. Puig, Alenya, but he doesn't trust them, and so we kind of almost have to get over that. And so he goes to the full internationals. There aren't many other options anymore, as much as I praised the depth of the squad earlier. We can debate the issues with his formation, rotation, and overlooking players, but the decision to send out Pedri for the post-game interview is completely unacceptable. Maybe they have a rotation or choose randomly, which should not be the case, but to put Pedri in that situation, if it's just the vets refusing to speak, is awful. And for all the talk of Koeman as a disciplinarian, this would be a terrible look if it is what it looks like. Listen, after the heartbreak of recent seasons, we knew the road down the mountain would be bumpy, and I consider this another one of those bumps. But I'm not giving up on this season altogether. There is still a Champions League spot that needs to be won. So I'll keep trying to be optimistic and let everybody else air out their frustrations online. And I'll keep saying, as I always do, Forza Barca.